okay? So how in the world do we get eukaryotes then? So we have our prokaryotes. That took long enough, right? That explanation was nuts, right? And then we get this oxygen because we have some of these photosynthetic bacteria, okay? But now we need to form eukaryotes, so things with organelles and all of that jazz. And it's obviously a complex process. As you can see from this figure, this helps explain it, but a lot of the membranes actually, the membranes inside of the cell, like the membrane organelles, come from kind of like the inside or the outside of the cell kind of folding in and forming those ridges, which is what you can see up here in this picture, that we kind of just had these ridges of membrane from the outside kind of fold in. And that's what basically created our nucleus and our endoplasmic reticulum. Again, this was over 800 million years, right? So long time, okay? But these things kind of folded in over time, wrapped up around the DNA. That would be seen as an advantage because that DNA is more protected. And then we have this endoplasmic reticulum, okay? And then these like precursors to eukaryotic cells, which is what this like middle, mainly purple cell is, are what are going to be the building blocks of what we know as eukaryotic cells, okay? So what I'm telling you about right now is something super, super important called endosymbiont theory. Endosymbiont theory is super, super important, and it's basically going to tell us how our mitochondria appeared, and it's the basis for the fact that our mitochondria was once a freestanding prokaryote, okay? How are we getting eukaryotes? Well, partly this infolding of the membrane for sure, because that's going to give us some membrane-bound organelles, but also a bigger prokaryote ate a smaller prokaryote, and that's actually going to form a whole entire organelle, specifically one of our most important ones, the mitochondria, okay? So that's what is being shown here, right? So this precursor eukaryotic cell is engulfing a prokaryote, and it's a prokaryote that is heterotrophic and aerobic, okay? So it's producing its own energy, which is pretty amazing. So some prokaryotes at the time were producing their own energy, and basically this precursor eukaryote, I mean, over, again, 800 million years, precursor eukaryotes were eating up these little guys, but instead of digesting them, they're actually gaining energy from them because these are highly energy producing prokaryotes. And that's a real big benefit to the cell because now it doesn't need to go find things to eat. It has this energy producer inside of it where it's more able to break down the things that it's eating because of this energy producer. And that was hugely, hugely, hugely helpful to that cell, which would give it an advantage to survive and reproduce more. And now we have a whole fleet of amazing eukaryotic cells. Then over time, those same really amazing eukaryotic cells probably engulfed a photosynthetic prokaryote, perhaps a cyanobacteria, which would have been the precursor then to the plant cell. Okay, so how do we know this to be true? Well, there's a lot of different data. There's a lot of different evidence that shows that our mitochondria was probably once a freestanding prokaryote, but something that you might not know about your mitochondria. So here's my really great picture of a mitochondria. We should know that it's the powerhouse of the cell, hopefully, okay? And it has all these membranes in the inside, okay? But something you might not know is that your mitochondria actually has its own set of circular DNA in it, which is crazy, okay? Why is that crazy? Well, one, we don't have circular DNA. We have chromosomes, right? We have linear DNA, okay? The only things that have circular DNA are prokaryotes, right? So this is crazy. There's no reason for us to have circular DNA if it wasn't a precursor to, or wasn't, part of a prokaryote at one point. So that's pretty nuts. And that's one of our main pieces of evidence. But two, it just allows for this idea that this guy probably existed on its own at one point with its own DNA. Okay. Kind of fun fact about the mitochondrial DNA is it's 100% maternal. It 100% comes from your mom. So while everything else of you is a 50-50 mix for the most part between mom and dad's chromosomes, this guy comes directly from mom, which is kind of a crazy, weird phenomenon. But we can actually talk about it a little bit when we get to genetics in a long while. And we talk about mitochondrial diseases because there are a few. All right, back to my favorite analogy, okay, the football field, okay? So this is pretty crazy, okay, but here's the origin of Earth, right, all the way down here. So we have life beginning at the 15-yard line, and then photosynthesis starts at about the 20-yard line, but we don't actually have enough oxygen to make an atmosphere, which is what I was referring to at that when we talked about the oxygen revolution, right, until the 48-yard line. Okay, so truly, if you're looking at this football field, for this first half of the Earth's life, there's been nothing but some single-celled organisms, no oxygen, no nothing for half of the Earth's existence, right? And then right around this 50-yard line, we finally have enough oxygen for an atmosphere, okay? The first eukaryotes don't appear until like 80, no, not 80. My math is terrible. 50, 60, 63 yards in, right, is when these first eukaryotes are going to start to appear. And we don't see multicellular organisms until like 82 yards in, right? So all the way over here, right, if you can picture this, these 18 yards are like all of multicellular organisms' history, right? So if the Earth is 100 yards, these 18 just on the right-hand side are all multicellular organisms' history, and I'm going to show you just how crazy that is, okay? But hopefully this puts into perspective just how long these things take and how we are so far from being the center of this Earth because we've been around for like 0 parts of it, okay? All right, next step, if you're going back to this clock, now we have single-celled eukaryotes, and now we need to get into multicellular eukaryotes, animals, colonization of land, all that good stuff. Okay, so this all happens with help of the Cambrian Explosion, just a period of time where we see marine life just absolutely booming, because marine life existed long before anything got onto land. Okay, so the Cambrian Explosion, you should just know, is this explosion of marine life and diversity, probably because quickly changing and vastly different environments and food sources, right, that are going to lead to rapid amounts of natural selection or adaptive radiation from when we talked about that in evolution. And so we see all of these things. Now, this sounds crazy, but it was like a 30 to 40 million year period, which is still a crazy long period of time. But as far as the span of the Earth goes, it's actually very, very, very short that we're seeing all of this diversity come into play. So lots of really, really fun sea creatures show up during the Cambrian Explosion. Okay, and then our next step, kind of as we're getting across today, is the colonization of land. Okay, basically over time, and evolution has shown this, and fossil records have shown this. The appendages, these swimming appendages, are going to become more distinct for land, right? And these tails are going to become, instead of more like fishy tails, more like land animal tails. These animals are going to be able to gain a lot of mass because they no longer need to be buoyant. They're no longer swimming through water, and so they're just crawling and being lazy on land. And we see this general progression over time in evolution. I'm not even going to go into all the details because there are so many, but in our next step, we kind of see this evolution and we see this booming of colonization on land, which takes place long after. Long after we see all these sea creatures. Okay, so kind of crazy, but we're going to see the colonization of land. If we go back to our football field, I don't think I put it on there, but it was 530 million years ago. Okay, and it's going to be at about the 8.5. So about the opposing team's 11-yard line, about right here where my mouse is. Right, that's when we're actually going to see land colonized, which means things have only been living on land for about 10 yards of the Earth's history. Okay, or 540 million years out of 4.5 billion. 540 million is nothing. Okay, and that's everything that's ever been on land is just in that tiny little like red zone at the end if you're a football fan. Okay, all right. Well, a few other things then. Just to talk about is going to be the fact that once life hits Earth in these 10 yards at the end, we just see an absolutely rapid burst in diversity taking place and lots and lots of crazy things happening. So for reference, about 514 million years ago, we have more like developed fish. Plants appear 421 million years ago. So plants are actually more evolved than like fish or other sea creatures, which is pretty crazy. So that would be at about the 91 yard or like the 9 yard of the opposing team, which is pretty nuts. Insects, 374 million years ago. Sharks, 328. Amphibians, 281 million years ago, just like 6 yards from the end zone at this point. Dinosaurs, so this is nuts. Our first dinosaurs actually it would appear like at this 95-yard mark or 5 yards away from the end zone. So all of dinosaurs, all of those crazy things that you think of from prehistoric times, all of that happened like right in this little range, right before the end zone, so close to where we are right now, as opposed to like where we started, which is really, really nuts if you think about it. Okay, so then we have this huge mass extinction, and this is really important to know about. So there's 6 major mass extinctions. I'm certain that we're in one currently as well because humans are ruining everything, okay? But at this 1 yard line, okay, or AKA, I can tell you the actual time, 46 million years ago, okay, we are going through a massive extinction that takes out 75% of all life on Earth, okay, just 1 yard of this entire thing. So just so recently, 46 million years ago, we knock out 75% of life. But with that, after these mass extinctions, we see times of this adaptive radiation because of the things left. We just see this diversity just absolutely bursting forth because now there's no competition, like everything is fair game, everything starts fresh. We have all this new life booming, and then we see a ton of diversity. So in that last yard of the football field, after that mass extinction, is when we see pretty much everything that you can think about today. Okay, so armadillos, whales, wolves, great apes appeared 15 million years ago. Hippos appeared 5 million years ago. Mammoths, lions, Lucy, if you've heard of Lucy, who was like human-like, the first like sort of human kind of mix between this like great ape ancestor and our today humans, was 3.2 million years ago. Saber-toothed cattle. And then this is the crazy part. Humans have only been on Earth for 200,000 years. 200,000 years. So if you picture an eighth of an inch, so I'm going to get a ruler out. It's going to be backwards for you guys, but that's okay. And you picture 1/8 of an inch. It's about the width of like a pencil, right? If you put a pencil down at the end of the yard line on your school's football field, right? A pencil down right on the yard line. That width, in comparison to the entire field, that is how long humans have been on Earth. It's like one finger's width. So this distance of time, 200,000 years, is how long humans have been on Earth in comparison to the entire 100 yards of the football field. So we have been on Earth for absolutely no time. Somehow we have found a way to destroy it in every way possible. But as far as the history of life, and that's why this is crazy to just kind of have in one sort of lesson, but as far as the history of life goes, like we have been around for absolutely none of it. So hopefully this graphic helps you. There's a great video. I'll actually share it with you because I got the idea. Football field, timeline of the Earth. Let me just get the link really quick. It's really, really interesting. At least I think it's really interesting because I just think it's crazy that all of these things appeared so quickly. Okay, but I'll share this link with you guys because I think it's valid, and you can take a look. Okay, but the big things to remember from today are the 4 steps to the first life or the first prokaryotic cell on Earth. Okay, so getting those organic compounds into macromolecules, into protocells, and then the creation of that basically self-replicating RNA. Okay, so those are really important to know. It's important to know that there was no oxygen present at the beginning of Earth. It's important to know that oxygen eventually appears because of photosynthetic cyanobacteria, but it took like basically half the Earth's history to build up enough oxygen and create an atmosphere enough for actual organisms to use that oxygen. Eukaryotes are coming about via something we call endosymbiosis. Okay, where we have larger prokaryotes eating smaller energetic prokaryotes and creating what we would consider the first eukaryotic cells. And then multicellular organisms and the colonization of land happened very, very recently. And the diversity of life has really sprung up so quickly for such a short period of time. If you think back to like the fact that we have 300,000 species of beetles, right? And that beetles have not been around for very long, it's pretty nuts to think about. So that is the origins of life.